Good afternoon. Thank you all for being here. I'm Zeta Govan, counselor for Ward 8, and this is the Finance Committee meeting. I'm officially starting it at 1:06, and I have Council Davila is on Zoom. I have Attorney Shea here. Thank you for coming, Counselor. And Karen Lee is here. She's a resident. So we are here to discuss the revised and amended resolution for the Community Impact Fund that we are proposing. So this is a resolution, of course, it doesn't have any mandates tied to it. But I do want to present it so that we can bring it to City Council and we can have a vote on it. So if you wouldn't mind, Karen, would you please read the resolution?
Sure. That's probably a good idea so that it's on the record and
Yes.
everyone has a understanding, because there was some confusion on this resolution. And what this is a pre-planning step. So let me just go ahead and read it. Revised amended resolution. Resolution supporting the development of a coordinated framework and transparent approach to address municipal and community impacts associated with the Springfield Regional Justice Center. City of Springfield, City Council. Whereas the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, through the Division of Capital Assets Management and Maintenance, is advancing the development of the Springfield Regional Justice Center under a long-term public-private partnership lease structure. And whereas the Justice Center will consolidate multiple court functions into a single regional facility intended to serve the Commonwealth for several decades. And whereas the consolidation and long-term operation of such a facility may alter the scale, concentration, location, and duration of impacts on municipal services and surrounding community conditions. And whereas these impacts may include, but are not limited to, demands on municipal services, transportation and traffic conditions, public safety coordination, infrastructure, land use patterns, and broader community conditions over time. And whereas community impacts associated with large-scale public projects may also include public health considerations, including but not limited to water, air quality, environmental conditions, access, and broader determinants of health. And whereas the City Council recognizes that both direct and indirect impacts may evolve over the life cycle of the facility. And whereas the request for proposals for the Springfield Regional Justice Center required proposers to identify and describe potential economic, environmental, and community impacts associated with each of their proposals. And whereas such impact-related responses are being considered as part of the overall evaluation of proposals, but are not incorporated into the project's total cost framework, and therefore may not be systematically accounted for over the life cycle of the project. And whereas the City Council recognizes that when such impacts are not accounted for within the project structure, their associated costs may be borne by the city and its residents over time. And whereas in the absence of a defined structure, any revenues, contributions, or resources associated with addressing such impacts may be absorbed into general municipal operations rather than directed toward the specific impacts they are intended to address. And whereas the City Council recognizes the importance of ensuring that any such revenues or resources are used for their intended purposes through a defined, transparent, and accountable approach. And whereas state law provides mechanisms for establishing dedicated and restricted municipal funds for specific purposes. And whereas the proposed P3 lease structure, or public-private partnership lease, contemplates long-term financial commitments by the Commonwealth over a period of approximately 40 years or more, with possible extensions. And whereas the City Council believes it is appropriate to ensure that such impacts are addressed through defined, transparent, and coordinated approaches over the life cycle of the project. consistent with the Commonwealth's procurement process. And do you want to take?
Yeah, I could do the
Yeah.
results. So now therefore be it resolved. 1, support for addressing impacts. The Springfield City Council expresses its support for identifying and implementing approaches to address municipal and community impacts associated with the Springfield Regional Justice Center over the life cycle of the project. 2, coordinated framework. The City Council supports the development of a defined and coordinated framework to address impacts associated with the operation of the Justice Center over time, including establishing roles, communication protocols, and coordination procedures. The coordinated framework may include consideration of public health impacts, including the potential use of recognized assessment tools where appropriate. 3, life cycle approach. The City Council supports an approach that is sufficiently flexible to address both direct and indirect impacts as they evolve over the full life cycle of the facility. 4, consistency with procurement. The City Council recognizes that any such approach should be consistent with the Commonwealth's procurement process and may include post-award coordination among the Commonwealth, the selected developer or property owner, and the city. 5, targeted use, dedicated fund, and transparency. The City Council expresses that any actions, revenues, contributions, or resources associated with such an approach should be used to address impacts related to the Justice Center and not as general municipal revenue, and further expresses that such funds should, to the extent permitted by law, be placed in a separate dedicated fund with expenditures limited to defined impact-related purposes and administered through a transparent and publicly accountable process. Such a process may include publicly noticed application procedures, defined eligibility criteria, open deliberation, and clear reporting on the use of funds. 6, post-award coordination and stakeholder engagement. The City Council requests and encourages the administration to convene within 60 days of project selection a coordinated working group to address project-related impacts over time. The City Council invites participation from DCAM, the selected developer or property owner, relevant city departments, representatives of the City Council, and community stakeholders. The administration is requested to provide a written update to the City Council within 90 days of project selection, summarizing participants' discussions and next steps. 7, continued engagement and consideration of additional mechanisms. Nothing in this resolution precludes continued discussion with DCAM, the selected developer or property owner, or other stakeholders regarding additional mechanisms to address project-related impacts over time, consistent with the Commonwealth's procurement process. 8, intent to establish governance structure. The City Council expresses its intent to pursue appropriate legislative action to establish a formal governance structure for any such dedicated fund, including provisions to ensure transparency, accountability, and public participation in decision-making. Transmission. This city clerk is directed to transmit a copy of this resolution to relevant parties, including the Springfield Legislative Delegation, the mayor of the city of Springfield, the Department of Capital Asset Management and Maintenance, and the Office of the State Auditor and the Governor of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. So that's the resolution and the resolve. I again want to publicly thank Karen Lee for being the citizen in our city who has been bringing this forward and continuing to stay on top of it and helping me greatly with developing this document. So at this time, I could ask if you have any questions or any comments from anyone. Councilor Davila?
No questions.
Thank you, sir. Attorney Shea?
No, I
Okay.
would point out that any revenues that come into the city have to go to the general fund.
Well, unless there's a stabilization fund set up for that.
Check that.
Yeah.
Well, and that's the reason that, because that's true, right? Because that's what happened with MGM money. That's what happened with the cannabis tax money. And now we were told when we got MGM here, the residents were told that we were gonna have tax relief because MGM came here, and we have not had tax relief. So that's one of the reasons why I'm really intent on doing something like this, because God forbid, the courthouse is built 20 years from now, I probably won't be around, but, something happens, and we have to pony up the money from the taxpayers again, if we don't have an established fund. So that's the reason we're requesting to do this, and we're aware that, money does go into the general fund, but if we establish something like this, then it wouldn't have to.
Well, it would start there, but then it would go into a reserve fund.
Right.
So the thought process in this is mirroring how the CPA, Community Preservation Act, works. And I have direct experience in that as the CPA admin. And so as I started looking at how this fund could be developed, that's kind of the framework that I was using, that the fund would be a reserved fund for particular impacts, particular projects. And this is just a primary step, a preliminary step. This is a process it's going to take to get there.
Yeah.
But yeah, so this is the first step, is just an awareness that this is something that we should start talking about, because this is the next 40 to 60 years. And already we've seen impacts, right? We've seen 5 historic buildings come down. We've seen businesses displaced, and that's a loss. That's a cost to that. So how do you cost that out? And how do you mitigate that? So it doesn't matter what the fund is called, mitigation, municipal impact, whatever you want to call it. But the purpose of it is to address those kind of impacts and to help businesses that have been displaced and of course, the big question is, okay, where's the money coming from to fund this, right? I mean, that's
Right, yeah. And I think this is something that I don't think that we've, as a council, have done before. I know when we decided to put the CPA in place, there was a vote, the residents voted and they were in favor of it, most of them, and we implemented it. And it's not, something that will happen overnight, and it's not going to happen without a lot of work put into it. I think it's just something that we have to begin doing as a council, thinking about our future, our children and our children's children who are going to be hopefully living in this city, and not being impacted negatively by things that we could have prevented or we could have put in place to prevent.
So it is interesting that, where is the money? How are we going to fund this? And that's a legitimate question. And that's one of the things that this committee group will talk about. Like, okay, these are things that we need to address. How are we going to address them? And there's a few ways. You could find grants for these impacts. You could put maybe a district incremental financing on that particular area, wherever the courthouse is going to be, and sequester that money or whatever to this fund. You could do that, but then that takes money out of the general revenue for other purposes to do that. So there's a lot of different tools you can look at, and I think that's what this committee essentially will look at, is how do we address that? What do we expect? Nobody expected the toxic health problem at the courthouse there either. And we weren't prepared for it.
Right.
So this is just planning in advance to put something in place.
Yeah. And it's a resolution, we're just making.
But this courthouse, and I'm just asking this question. This is not, the property is going to be a private developer. And so the private developer is going to have to pay taxes on that piece of property, and the income from the state to that developer is going to go toward those taxes and then pay him money. I don't see where there's money coming out to the city from that. like if you had the building and you rented it out to the state and the state paid you money, that's your money and you're paying your taxes with it.
Well, that's why I said the diff, that we could,
So
the tax revenue generated by the courthouse would be put into this fund.
see, that's where I wonder if you'd have a problem.
Well, right, and
that's
I don't
why
know if that's,
This is very
Yeah.
initial.
I don't have that on the top of my head, I'm just
Yeah,
saying.
yeah.
there's just one.
And it
one
could be,
thought.
say, it doesn't have to be necessarily the whole, again, we're not gonna solve this today, but I'm
Well,
glad you're
well,
asking that question.
yeah.
That's a really good question. I imagine, right, if in the best of worlds, I guess you could say, okay, well then, if not the whole tax, maybe a portion of the tax could be put into the fund to mitigate any future negative impacts it might have, or something like that, you know, but I think this committee, like you said, would be the one to have those discussions and to make a decision on that.
It seemed like the courthouse is gonna bring more positive revenue.
It will definitely bring
I mean,
positive
But suppose
revenue.
they stuck this in West Springfield, we'd be up in arms.
Yeah,
Courthouse there is gonna.
because our courthouse is
businesses
here in the
around there.
city. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. But we do, and I think sometimes we get tunnel vision and don't think about the negative impacts that will impact it, like Karen said, the historic properties that have been torn down. You know, that's a negative impact to our city. We're not thinking about that. We don't know what that's going to.
We're
cause in the
always looking
future.
at the positive, which is good, and yes, there will be
Mhm.
economic development, but to help out the negative impacts where it can be turned into a positive. I mean, we always seem to be able to monetize the positives and forget that there's negatives.
Are we-
And so,
yeah. How can we monetize what the negative impacts might be? Like, what did it cost for the Roderick Ireland courthouse with the mold? You know, what financially, it cost some people their lives, actually, you know, so those kind of impacts, we need to be aware, and we pray and hope that it doesn't happen. But it might, and we want to be prepared as opposed to being caught, you know, unprepared.
right, and then there's the environmental as well. So I just don't think we can ignore that they're there. I think we need to put them in the proper perspective along with the growth that's expected, but we don't ignore that either.
Right, yeah. Alright. Those are good questions and we appreciate it.
Well, I just.
So, okay, well, Counselor Davila?
No questions, man. No questions.
Perfect. Okay, so we are going to be bringing this to our city council chambers. I'm not sure if it's going to be on the next meeting, which is on Monday, because we have the budget hearings going on, and I'm not sure if it's gonna be added to
File
the
this
agenda.
by Wednesday for the agenda.
No, so it'd have to be for the following meeting then. Okay, so it'll be on the following, not Monday's meeting, the following meeting. So we'll file it this week, and it'll be on the agenda for the following meeting.
So do you need to take a vote to get it out of subcommittee? I don't
That's why I
know.
was asking,
Yeah, that's correct.
so can you make a motion, sir?
Yeah, I make a motion that we bring forward the resolution as presented to the full city council chamber for the next regular meeting.
Thank you, Councilor Davila. All in favor, it's me and you. Aye.
Aye.
Motion passed. Thank you so much. All right, so I think that's good. Look at, before 1:30, I ended the meeting.
That's pretty good.
I'm good, huh? All right, so I
Thank you,
adjourn the
Counselor, for
meeting.
coming.
Thank you, Counselor. Thank you, Focus Springfield. Thank you, Attorney Shay.
All right, we'll see
Thank
you
you,
all.
Karen.